Pull over. Not literally, but stop what you are doing right now, because what I am about to tell you changes every single drive you take starting this week. There is a new federal speed camera bill that just cleared its final legislative hurdle, and the number of states that are activating under it is not 2 or 3. It is not a pilot program in a handful of cities. The activation list as of this month covers 38 states. 38. With the remaining 12 either already under equivalent state-level frameworks or scheduled for Phase 2 rollout before the end of the calendar year. What that means in plain language: if you drive on any federally designated highway corridor in this country, you are now operating inside a camera enforcement grid. And the rules governing that grid are so different from anything American drivers have experienced before that the comparison to the old system almost does not make sense. I want to be precise with you. This is not a story about a new camera going up on one stretch of road in one city. This is a story about a nationwide infrastructure that has been funded, built, tested, and is now switching on. And the specific details, the fine thresholds, the appeal windows, the data sharing agreements between states, and the one enforcement mechanism that almost no coverage is explaining correctly, are what I am going to walk you through completely. Do not skip ahead. The last section of this video is the one that is going to matter most to the most people. I will tell you why when we get there. To understand why this bill passed and why it passed now, you have to look at the numbers that landed on congressional desks over the last 3 years. American road fatalities were supposed to be declining. For most of the 2000s and 2010s, the trend line moved in the right direction. Better vehicle safety technology, improved road design, increased seatbelt compliance. The data was improving. Then something broke. Between 2019 and 2023, traffic fatalities in the United States increased by more than 20%. More than 40,000 Americans died on public roads in 2023 alone. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration flagged speeding as a contributing factor in 29% of all fatal crashes during that window. That is not a rounding error. That is nearly 12,000 people whose deaths were directly connected to a vehicle traveling faster than conditions allowed. The political argument against automated speed enforcement, that it was government overreach, that it was a revenue grab, that Americans had a cultural right to the open road, collapsed under the weight of that data. When the fatality numbers came back as bad as they did, the conversation in Washington shifted from whether to do this to how fast. The answer, as of this week, is immediately. The federal framework that passed does 3 things no previous federal transportation bill has done. First, it establishes a national minimum standard for speed enforcement technology on federally designated highway corridors. Second, it creates a unified violation processing and data sharing protocol so that a violation recorded in one state can follow a driver's record into another. Third, and most importantly, it provides direct federal funding for camera infrastructure deployment, which is why 38 states moved so quickly. The equipment cost is largely covered. The only decision left for each state was whether to opt in. 38 of them said yes. At the same time. Before we get to the specific rules and fine structures, I want to spend a few minutes on the technology itself, because understanding what the system can actually do is what makes the rule changes land with the weight they deserve. The camera infrastructure being deployed under this framework is not the grainy, single-angle speed camera that got challenged in court in Baltimore in 2012 and taken offline because the images were not clear enough to be legally defensible. That generation of equipment is obsolete. What is going up on gantries across 38 states right now is multi-sensor arrays. Each installation typically includes 3 components working together: The first is a high-definition forward and rear-facing camera system capable of capturing a clear, legally admissible image of your license plate, the front of your vehicle, and, in many cases, the driver's position behind the wheel, at speeds up to 150 miles per hour, in low light, in rain, in direct sun glare. The resolution is high enough that the plate read is unambiguous in over 98% of captures. The second is a dedicated short-range radar unit that measures vehicle speed independently of the camera. The speed reading and the image are time-stamped and linked, so the violation record contains both your plate and the radar-confirmed speed at the moment of the image capture. These two data points together are what make the violation legally defensible in every state that has approved the framework. The third component, present at roughly 60% of installations, is an overhead LiDAR unit, light detection and ranging, that adds a three-dimensional measurement of vehicle position and speed, providing a redundant data point that further insulates the violation record from legal challenge. All three data streams feed into a centralized processing system. The violation is flagged, the plate is cross-referenced against live DMV databases across state lines, the registered owner's information is retrieved, and a notice is generated. The average time from violation capture to notice generation in testing was under 4 hours. In most cases, the notice is in the mail the same day. There is no intercept. There is no warning. There is no point at which your awareness of the situation has any effect on the outcome. 6 specific enforcement changes are active under the new framework. Here is every one of them. This is where we start, because it is the change that will affect the largest number of drivers in the shortest amount of time. Under the prior patchwork of state-level automated enforcement, where it existed at all, the standard violation threshold in most jurisdictions was set at 10 or 11 miles per hour over the posted limit. That number existed partly for technical reasons and partly as a political buffer. Engineers knew that speedometers carry a margin of error of a few percent, and legislators did not want the system generating tickets for drivers who were genuinely trying to comply. The 10-over threshold was a cushion. That cushion has been cut in half under the new federal standard. On standard federally designated highway corridors, the automated violation threshold is now set at 5 miles per hour over the posted limit. On corridors classified as high density, defined under the framework as any segment averaging more than 50,000 vehicle trips per day, which covers most urban interstate segments in any major metro area, the threshold drops to 3 miles per hour over. What that means in practice. On a 70-mile-per-hour highway, you can trigger a violation at 73 miles per hour in a high-density segment. Most cruise control systems, when set to 70, will drift to 71 or 72, depending on grade and load. The margin for passive compliance is essentially gone. Fine structure under the federal baseline, which states may exceed but not undercut. First offense, standard corridor, $80. First offense, high-density corridor, $130. Second offense within 18 months, $260. Third offense within 18 months, $420 plus mandatory state DMV review. The 18-month rolling window is new. Previous state-level frameworks typically used 12 months. The extension means a violation you received 14 months ago is still live on your record for purposes of escalation when the next one comes in. This is the change that turns a manageable local problem into a nationwide one, and it is the change that almost no one is explaining in full. Previously, an automated speed camera violation in one state was largely contained to that state. If you were a Virginia resident and received a camera ticket in Maryland, Maryland collected the fine, but the violation did not automatically transfer to your Virginia driving record. The databases did not communicate in real time. Interstate enforcement was inconsistent, slow, and full of gaps that experienced drivers had quietly learned to exploit. That gap is closed under the new framework. The Unified Violation Processing Protocol creates a real-time data bridge between participating state DMV systems. When a violation is recorded against your plate in any of the 38 participating states, the notice goes to the registered owner, and simultaneously a flag is transmitted to the DMV in your home state. Your home state then has the discretion, and under the framework's guidelines, the strong encouragement, to record the violation on your in-state driving record. What this means: a camera ticket you receive while passing through Ohio on a road trip does not stay in Ohio. It follows you home to Texas, or Florida, or New York. And if you already have one violation on your home state record, and the Ohio ticket constitutes a second offense in the 18-month window, you are now looking at second offense fine levels and potential DMV review from a violation that occurred in a state you were just driving through. The appeal process for cross-state violations is handled through the issuing state's portal, not your home state's. You have 30 days from the notice date. After 30 days, the violation converts, and the cross-state transmission becomes permanent. Under the new framework, speed violations recorded in designated school zones and active work zones are not subject to the standard fine structure. They are subject to a multiplier. A first offense in a school zone during posted hours, typically defined as 30 minutes before and after the school day start and end times, carries a base fine of $250 under the federal minimum standard. States may set this higher. Several already have, with New York and California setting school zone first offense automated camera fines at $400 and $375, respectively. Work zone violations during active construction, defined as any period when workers are physically present on or immediately adjacent to the roadway, flagged in the system via a real-time construction activity feed from state DOTs, carry a minimum first offense fine of $200 under the federal baseline, with second offenses reaching $500. The critical detail here is the phrase, "when workers are physically present." Previously, work zone speed limits applied any time the signs were posted, regardless of whether any workers were actually there. Drivers had learned, rationally, to treat an empty construction zone at 2 in the morning as a lower-risk environment. The new framework ties the multiplier specifically to active worker presence, but the system that determines worker presence is a live data feed, not a sign on the road. You will not know from inside your vehicle whether the elevated fine applies at that moment. The system will. Previous speed camera deployments across most states were restricted to daytime hours. The operational window was typically 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. That restriction existed because early generation camera equipment struggled with nighttime image quality to a degree that made the captures legally vulnerable. The new equipment does not have that limitation. Low light performance on the current generation of enforcement cameras is sufficient for legally admissible plate and vehicle captures at any hour. As a result, the new framework removes the daytime restriction entirely. Automated speed enforcement under the new system operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, including holidays. The fine structure does not vary by time of day. A violation recorded at 3 a.m. on a Sunday carries the same weight and generates the same notice as one recorded at 8 a.m. on a Tuesday. This matters most for drivers who have historically treated late-night or early morning highway driving as a lower enforcement environment. That environment no longer exists on federally designated corridors in participating states. If you rent vehicles, drive a company car, or operate any vehicle not registered in your personal name, this section applies to you specifically. Under previous automated enforcement frameworks, violations recorded against rental vehicles created a complicated liability question. The plate was registered to the rental company. the rental company would receive the notice, identify the renter from their booking records, and either pass the fine to the renter directly or charge an administrative fee on top of the fine and collect it through the credit card on file. The process was inconsistent across companies and across states. The new federal framework establishes a standardized renter liability protocol. Rental companies operating in participating states are required to maintain a real-time booking database accessible to the violation processing system. When a violation is recorded against a rental plate, the system automatically queries the rental company's database, identifies the renter for that vehicle at that date and time, and issues the violation notice directly to the renter, not the rental company. For fleet vehicles operated by businesses, the framework requires companies above a certain fleet size threshold to register a designated fleet compliance officer whose contact information is on file with the violation processing system. Violations recorded against fleet plates are routed to that officer, who is then responsible for identifying the driver and transmitting the violation to their personal record. The practical effect: there is no longer a buffer between a camera violation and the individual who is driving. The notice follows the driver, not the plate owner. This last rule is different from the others. It is not an enforcement mechanism. It is a disclosure requirement. And what it is going to disclose is the thing that I think matters most for every driver watching this. One of the provisions of the new federal framework requires every participating state to publish quarterly public reports detailing the volume of violations recorded at each camera location, the total fine revenue generated, and the percentage of that revenue allocated to road safety programs versus general state funds. The reason this provision exists is that the political opposition to automated speed enforcement has always centered on the argument that it is a revenue tool, not a safety tool. Legislators who supported the framework made this transparency requirement a condition of their votes. The argument was, if this is genuinely about safety and not about money, prove it publicly every 3 months. What the pilot program data, already public from several states, shows is complicated. In high fatality corridor segments where cameras were deployed, injury crashes decreased by between 18% and 31% within the first 12 months of camera activation. That is a real safety effect and a significant one. The cameras do change driver behavior, and changed driver behavior does reduce crashes. But the revenue figures from those same pilot locations are staggering. One 14-mile corridor segment in a mid-Atlantic state generated $4.2 million in violation revenue in its first 6 months of operation. That is from a single road segment. When you scale that across 38 states and thousands of camera locations, the total annual revenue projection from this enforcement network runs into the billions. Both things can be true simultaneously. The cameras can reduce crashes and generate enormous revenue at the same time. But knowing that the revenue is that large changes how you should think about the system's incentive structure. And it changes how seriously you should take the appeal process if you believe a notice was issued in error. Under the transparency requirement, every camera location's violation volume is public record. If a location is generating an unusually high volume of violations relative to its traffic count, that data is now available and has already been used in several pilot states by advocacy groups to challenge camera placements that appear to prioritize revenue capture over genuine safety improvement. 6 changes, all active now, all automated, all following you across state lines. Here is the practical checklist for every driver. 1. Recalibrate your cruise control habits. The 5-over buffer is gone on standard corridors, and the 3-over buffer in high-density zones is razor thin. Set your adaptive cruise at the limit or 2 over at maximum, and treat that as a firm ceiling, not a starting point. 2. Know your 18-month window. If you have received any automated camera violation in any participating state in the last year and a half, you are already in an escalation window. Your next violation in any of the 38 states comes in at second offense pricing. Act accordingly. 3. School and work zones are not the same as they were. The fine multipliers are significant, and the worker presence trigger is invisible to you from inside your vehicle. Treat every posted school and work zone as if the multiplier is active, because you have no reliable way to know whether it is. 4. If you drive after midnight on federal highway corridors, the enforcement environment is identical to midday. Adjust your speed expectations accordingly. 5. If you rent vehicles or drive a fleet car, the administrative buffer between the plate and your personal record no longer exists. A camera ticket in a rental is a camera ticket on your record, issued directly with the same 30-day appeal window. 6. If you receive a notice and believe it is in error, use the appeal portal of the issuing state within 30 days. After 30 days, it converts. The transparency data on camera locations is public. If you want to understand the enforcement environment of a corridor you drive regularly, that data is now accessible. The system that activated this week is not going away. The safety data from pilot programs gives it political durability. The revenue it generates gives it institutional durability. The infrastructure investment locks it in for at least a decade. The only variable that changes your outcome in this environment is whether you understand exactly how it works before you get on the road.